Olá a todos, boa tarde. Vou fazer as hostilidades em inglês, porque os nossos convidados vão falar em inglês. Espero que todos percebam qualquer coisa que não acho que pergunta.
Sim.
Então, on behalf of the Faculty of Fine Arts, I warmly welcome all of you into this conference, especially our external guests and participants, and of course all the students, degree, bachelor, and master degree. This is a conference hosted by the Master in Graphic Design and Editorial projects within the context of the activities of the Special Interest Group Ligatures, partnership between Editorial and Ligatures research units and their members. Today's event embodies our commitment to fostering design and as a bridge between cultural heritage and forward-thinking innovation. So, I could present the master, but most of you already know the master, and most of you know the type design course, so we do type design classes in the bachelor and in the degree, so, and the master degree, so this is within this context. And within this context, we are honored to host and welcome Susana Carvalho-Bernau, founders of the Porto award-winning Atelier Carvalho-Bernau, whose practice spans type design, editorial systems, and they're both educators, so education is an activity. Briefly presenting, Susana Carvalho, designer and educator, merges editorial activity with collaborative pedagogy. Her decade-long teaching at institutions like the Royal Academy of the Arts informs her personal and corporate clients, I guess, if I can say this like that. And Carvalho, a type designer and professor at international institutions like ECAL in Lausanne. He designs fonts like Neutral and Atlas. I believe he's going to show something. They're going to show something. And their creations, but I have Neutral over there, so I can show you. I think it's from the past, only if you allow it.
Yeah. No, it's here. We have it too.
Okay. So their work is used in commercially in editorial and news outlets, among other works. And I think they're going to explain it better than me, but their work exemplifies how historical research or inspiration, the sources, fuels technical and cultural innovation. So This conference reflects the Master's ethos, designed as a dialogue between past and future. Susanna and Kai's research-driven methods align with Ligatures' mission, I guess. And, for our faculty, students, and guests, this is an invitation today to rethink our role, their experience, and our role collectively in preserving and redefining culture. So, thanks for joining us. Thank you once again for accepting this invitation, and I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you. So, we started our studio in 2005 in the Netherlands, in The Hague, and in 2021 we moved to Porto. Our practice focuses on the graphic design work with a strong emphasis on editorial design. But we also design identities, websites, and typefaces, which will be the focus of our talk today. We prepared this lecture after an invitation from Pedro Mado, thank you, to talk about the processes and references behind our type design work. What we find important in an educational context is to show you that projects with very different scope and resources are done with different approaches and also in different time frames, but always with the same curiosity and interest. We don't like type specimens. We always thought there was more that could be done with a type specimen than showing dummy text. We see dummy text as a waste of resources and as a wasted opportunity to share texts that we find important, things that influence us. So we are going to start by talking about a type specimen. This is the Reader. It's a publication and type specimen we edited, designed, and published in 2010. We wanted to make a gift, a sort of a generous gesture, rather than a sales catalog. Also because we did not release our own typefaces at the time. So it became more of a reader, an opportunity to show some references, hidden footnotes to other design processes, things that normally don't leave the studio. Basically, it was like opening the archives to discover our thought processes. It's a very simple brochure. It's here. You can have a look at the end if you'd like. Printed in 2 colors, where the second color, which is Pantone 72, has the same exact shape on every page that we use to represent 3 different publication formats. The content color, black, is used in accordance to the format chosen and design decisions we made for each text. During the design process, we noticed we had a new problem. What to do with the text snippets that contain navigation, information, captions, and notes. You can see them in the margins, the image. We needed a typeface to talk about our typefaces. And of course, it couldn't be one of the showcase typefaces, but also not a typeface that someone else designed. So what kind of typeface? Which tone of voice? We remembered a book about the design of Olivetti that we had just bought, where they talk about their integrated approach to design, from architecture to interior to furniture and the industrial design of their machines, as the wonderful diagram shows on the cover, to the actual typefaces of the typewriters. And we really liked that somehow, because in a much smaller way, the Reader was also such an integrated project, where we made the concept, the compilation, editing, and in one case, even the translation of the texts. We made the graphic design and type design and had full control over the production. So we thought a typewriter typeface was also great because we hadn't made any at that point. Atlas typewriter came later, and it really functioned like a different level, a different voice. So in one of the pages, there is a very small sample showing 4 of their typefaces. There. And we immediately fell in love with one called Candia, that Olivetti had commissioned from Joseph Müller-Brockmann, the great designer of Swiss modernism. To digitize this typeface, we devised a very simple approach. So we had 3 designers. It was the 2 of us and an intern that we had at the time, Jonas Heggi. And we split the character set in groups of letters that shared construction. And we worked independently on drawing. We met at the meeting table every hour to compare our drawings, to make adjustments, and continue autonomously. We designed this typeface in 24 hours. Of course, it's only one weight. Spread over 3 days, plus 1 week for fine-tuning, glyph expansion, and spacing. That's the typeface. So we made a typeface for what started out as, and in a way it still is, a type specimen.
Slightly changing pace. Leon is one of the projects that has been with us for almost 20 years now. Typefaces have very long lives. I wanted to quickly walk you all the way through from the beginning. So it started as my graduation work at the Type in Media course in The Hague at the Royal Academy at KBK. Where I graduated in 2006. And at the beginning, it looked like this. So the Roman already reasonably close to what it would later become, but then other family members that either didn't make the cut or, because they were kind of made to test out how far-flung a family can be. And then with this very overbearing italic that was sort of designed in the Renaissance tradition of being an independent kind of typeface, not like a companion typeface to a Roman. And a lot of research was done and talked about like French Renaissance punch cutter Robert Grandjean, the different periods and stations of his work from Lyon to Paris, back to Lyon to Antwerp to the Vatican. And the different motivations of why he tackled the different kinds of typefaces. The civilité, for example, was because he was kind of jealous that the Italians had italics, like their style of handwriting as typefaces, but the French sort of Gothic handwriting that was used at the time, there was no typefaces of that kind, so he decided he needed to make some. Or research about the influence the work of Grandjean had on later punch cutters, and so on and so on. For all of these topics, I recommend the essays of Hendrik Vervliet. But what was more important and inspiring than any sort of big historical fact was this one small detail. It's almost an anecdote, which is this block of standing type. Do you know what that is? It's like when you have metal type composed and you print it, and after you print it, you don't disassemble the metal type, but you wrap a twine around it and you store it for later reprints. So in this page that is composed with Grandjean's Grand Romain typeface with a wrong lowercase a. This is not an A that Grandjean designed. I don't know how it found its way in there. It is used consistently throughout this page and probably many others. And this is really like a big thing because in the early 20th century, a monotype employee called Frank Hinman Pierpont traveled to the museum of the former Plantin Moretos printing house, where Grandjean had worked for a really long time. And he took a brush proof, meaning he put a piece of paper on this standing type and rubbed it, right? And he got like a smeary kind of cliche print. And then he took that back to monotype, and he and Stelzer made a typeface called Plantin, which in turn was a little later the basis for Times, arguably one of the great typefaces of the 20th century. And so one of the main questions for me at the time was to imagine sort of an alternate reality Times, one in which Plantin had never existed, but that had the same sort of qualities of quiet anonymity and excellent readability. The other sort of big idea that I had 20 years ago for this typeface was this. We no longer file away on little sticks of metal to make a stamp for a letter and We no longer have this sort of three-dimensional impression on rough handmade paper that, you know, makes everything very round and everything feel very warm and organic. And instead, typeface designers now work, you know, with digital tools and look at everything in 100 times its real size, and every tiniest curve and parameter is designed with measurable values. And that is something that I wanted to show with this typeface, sort of a truth to materials or truth to a production method. And there's this talk by Matthew Carter, you should watch it, it's really good, where he demonstrates that while you can draw any kind of shape with a digital font editor, but I think it's very clear that, like any tool, Bezier drawing favors a certain way of drawing because it makes certain things easy.
All straight lines are dead straight. The curves have that kind of mathematical smoothness that the Bezier formula imposes.
And it makes certain other things difficult.
None of the straight lines are actually straight. The curves are kind of supple. It has that spark of life from the human hand that the machine or the program can never capture.
So, and it's interesting to explore and amplify what a tool wants to draw. And recent type design history is full of examples of typefaces drawn in what I think shorthand we can call digital ways. So what started out as a technical restriction is now a fairly popular style of drawing because perhaps we feel that this approach, as we have always called it, is true to the material. But it's also definitely a temptation to draw like this because, of course, corners and straight lines and fewer vector points are much easier to manipulate than tiny curves, subtle curves, lots of curves, and no straight lines. For the graduation itself, Susanna and I made a poster that sort of emphasizes the digital nature of the typeface by showing everything but the actual outlines. My classmate Frédéric Berlin, who would later go on to make RoboFont, the font editor for adults, helped me to write a little Python script to make sort of, you know, make this part kind of happen. And the other side is a type specimen, but, you know, still trying to fill it with as much information and meaning and stories about the process as possible. And this little leaflet is kind of important for the story of Lyon because right after graduating, we went to the ATAPAC conference in Lisbon, and there was Paul Barnes, who had been like a visiting professor one afternoon in our class together with Christian Schwartz, and I was like, gave it to him, and they came back the next afternoon and were like very interested, and we're like, we'll let you in on a secret. We're going to start a type foundry, and we think we could develop this into something. And I was, you know, hadn't expected that. I went into all of this very naively. And so, you know, starting a studio in The Hague right after our studies, it goes as it often goes, and self-initiated projects, you know, are always less important than, you know, earning money and surviving and so on. So a little while later, Christian and Paul were getting really impatient, and then Christian said, you know what, you are going to come to Baltimore and you're going to work in the studio next to me until this bloody typeface is finished. And I did. It was kind of cool working next to Christian, really, but everything else was terrible. It was not like a nice part of town. I was a bit scared going outside. It didn't matter. I was working all day, was working all night. And by the time I was done, I had sort of, you know, an almost finished version of the typeface ready. And then more or less we finalized it during the process of designing a paperback series for Octavo Publicaties in Amsterdam. Aesthetics, philosophy, politics. Kind of a dream assignment, but we worried like never before about, you know, very readable typography as we were laying the groundwork for, you know, thousands of pages of not very easy to understand text. This is the series. And I'm showing this only because we find it important to mention that what we really, really like and where we get so much direction and inspiration from is this circle of making type and using type. I think we are best at making the kinds of typefaces that we ourselves really want to use, and we know which typefaces we really want to draw through, you know, making typography and graphic design. Anyway, and then what really pushed this typeface over the edge was a phone call from Christian, and he said, okay, listen, you need to really finish it now because I've just sold it to the New York Times. They're redesigning the magazine. You have a month to finish it because they need to start the redesign. And so, voila, typeface. With little to no fanfare in 2009, the typeface was released. And we had no idea, honestly, that this would be such a literally life-changing thing to happen to us because of Paul's and Christian's trust and encouragement and work, I guess, on us. And the display family was already in development, and we finished that in 2010. You know, the usual adjustments to make a display family, like slightly different proportions, spacing, contrast, details, all that good stuff. There have been many uses of Lyon that we were really, really happy with over the years. It's a great motivation and encouragement, but also shows us how other people can have different ideas about how to use our typefaces, which then, of course, informs, you know, how we make typefaces. It's especially nice when it's something or somebody you like Veronica Ditting in her design for the Gentlewoman magazine. This is not, you know, this is not because it was a huge license that brought in a lot of money. This was like, I don't know, 50 bucks. But it was really, like, we were really happy about it. Or maybe because it's a cause that you are aligned to. This is Isometric Design, the Center for Reproductive Rights. Another nice example, and one of a long and ongoing collaboration, is Internazionale, an Italian news magazine. Mark Porter, the news designer, redesigned this magazine, going for all Lyon text everywhere, from the captions to the text to the headlines, everything. It's a great publication and an important one in Italy, which has a news landscape that is rather inward-looking and also kind of conservative. And Internazionale is quite left-leaning, let's say. They print what you could call old news. It's translations of foreign articles from journalism from other countries. So our typeface kind of helped to make the design look like exciting and fresh, I guess. So sometime later they came back and asked if we could redo the nameplate. Please, can you make it something that is based on Lyon, but something, you know, more urgent and young and cool? And Mark said, what about a stencil? And then a short while later, they made a special issue about Greece. If you remember when the European member states were like, we should kick Greece out of the European Union. So we talked with Giovanni Di Mauro, the editor-in-chief, and with Mark, and Giovanni was like, well, we have no time and no money, and I said, we can do 9 characters, and we made a Greek version of the nameplate. Don't look at it too closely. We made this in 1 week. And then they started making these extras and like thematic magazines and newspapers, and they wanted something based on the nameplate that we could, you know, that they could use to sort of slightly change the tone to be a bit younger and a bit rougher and so on and so on. And together with Robin Minches, we then turned the nameplate into a full typeface. And then, of course, they started using it on the magazine covers as well. A little later, they had the idea to make a like bona fide daily newspaper, sort of a pop-up newspaper leading up to the Italian elections. And Mark again said, okay, what I want is like a newspapery headline version of Lyon, but for really small sizes, because the headlines are going to be really small. So we made this, I guess, again with Robin Minches. Working with her is always quite wonderful. And then around that time, Commercial Type also said maybe we should do some language extensions, and that was amazing because it gave us the opportunity to, you know, work with some designers that we really admired. And so Ilya made the Cyrillic, Yannick and Daniel made the Hebrew, KJ and Wael made an Arabic. We're writing with in quote marks because, you know, they made it, and we occasionally consulted, and then they said, no, 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 you're wrong. And they said, but? And they said, no. And anyway, so we could tell them about Lyon, but they could tell us about Arabic, so to speak. And just recently, Irini finished the Greek version. So that was a pretty cool ride, and also an illustration of the idea. Type design is a group effort. Like, it's barely ever a person alone. It's just too many things to do. All of these names, plus many others that we didn't mention, that do quality control and write software and do the mastering and the hinting and all of that. Yes, anyway.
And manage the foundries.
Manage the foundry, maybe, yeah. Our beautiful label.
So now we're going to talk about Bill. In 2012, our friends at Lust, a graphic design studio from The Hague, invited us to design the new typeface for the Sandberg Institute in Amsterdam. The Sandberg Institute is the postgraduate program of the Rietveld Academy in Amsterdam. The design of the new website and identity is based on a metaphor of the Sandberg Institute as a library, in which each department, person, and project makes up one element of the knowledge archive. This was the whole concept behind the identity. The main idea was to have an infinite number of variations, multiple voices and expressions that the students and staff could generate from this typeface, for their own use, and not just a fixed institutional voice. So we designed a skeleton, a set of instructions that Lust would then use as a special part of the website, where you could distort the skeleton before applying a stroke, and you could change the stroke's thickness, angle, or even change it into an image. This was a little app that was inside the website of the Institute. You can also then download the image files of this, or if you use one of the standard strokes, you could also download a version of the typeface to use in your own projects as a student, for example, or to make posters or whatever. The typeface itself was just tracing the skeleton of a Caslin typeface, more or less. But what was much more interesting to us was that this intent of applying the stroke on a skeleton made us draw things differently and allow those idiosyncrasies of each approach to amplify each other instead of ironing them out, make them more specific, also through the materials. Just as an example, details that were originally added to the skeleton form to allow the larger weight variation. As you make these diagonal strokes heavier around the skeleton form, the vertex goes further and further down. By adding a small vertical to the diagonal stroke ends and a horizontal to where two diagonals join makes them align to the baseline and the X side much better. And as a bonus, we get a much more specific shape, one that tells you about how it is made. And in a bigger way, the reward we get for going against what we know how to do is that sometimes we arrive at something new and unusual and exciting. So for us, the canonical version of Bill is not this, and not even this, the simulation of the skeleton, but the actual skeleton itself, because of what you can do with it, and because that is where all the interesting specific shapes originate. But until very recently, an open single pass typeface was 100% impossible. It would just look like this. And maybe our definition of what constitutes a typeface or a font needs to be looser. Maybe a collection of code that does not in Adobe InDesign or Microsoft Word, but something that can be dropped in a piece of software to work with. Maybe that suffices as a kind of definition of a font, although it is not universally usable. This looser, more open idea of what a font is, open in the sense of echoes open work, but like the works it describes, a typeface can also be the kind of work that is only completely through its use or its user, that it's not a finalized artifact, but rather a raw material, a resource, an ingredient that receives its final form through its use. So anyway, we thought this was the canonical version of the typeface, but back then, in 2013, it couldn't be used anywhere apart from the Sandberg web tool. But then recently we found the Relief single line typeface project that was made at ISDAT in Toulouse. It was quite similar to our build project in that it was conceived as open paths as a font for use in routers and so on. But the most exciting thing to us was that Frédéric Berlan had written a Python script which generates a typeface with open contours in it. But crucially, also embedded in the font file is an additional SVG outline instruction around it. So it's not an actual outline, but just an instruction. What thickness, what color, what kind of end caps and corners. And many applications can apparently read that very well. Here is pages, and the font just appears in the font menu, even in the color that is specified in the SVG instruction bit. And they also work in InDesign or Illustration, but the cool thing is that when you then use these apps commands to convert text to outlines, you don't actually get the outline. You get the skeleton with the stroke thickness, color, and so on that is defined earlier, exposed and editable. And that is really interesting because now you can set type and then modify it in a way that was not possible before. This really already goes into the direction of a more permissive, broader definition of typeface that we mentioned earlier.
So our research is not always historical, quite often it's technical. In this project, also 7 minutes of historical research, 6 months of technical research, I think. In 2015 or so, HBO asked us if we wanted to help them with the problems that they had with like on-screen typography in their many interfaces. Because the thing is that their apps run on all kinds of devices, from like dumb set-top boxes to smart TVs to phones and so on. And they are looked at everywhere from small screens to wall screens. And there is some problems with that, you know, there's like just the physiological and physical problems of like reading distance versus font size versus pixel density and so on, but also the different technology stacks that were producing vastly different output, all with the same sort of input font files. This is just the same text, 2 screenshots from 2 different computers. I don't remember what it was. So immediately we felt like this is complex and possibly very technical and experimental. We should probably not do this alone. So we asked our good friend and former teacher, Eric van Blokland. You may know him from such fun little things like the first random font, Python API for font editors, brilliant type designer, popularized interpolation and variable fonts. He made that X-Files typeface. He co-authored the web font format. He's the head of the Type and Media program, and he's also a super cool guy. And Eric worked on this project with us. Here is the 7 minutes of historical research. We were like, okay, this is pretty simple. We need like a you know, very American looking, very relatable kind of starting point. We want something that is horizontally quite condensed, because some of these screens are really narrow, some of the columns are going to be very narrow, and that gives us sort of more vertical shapes, and that means the sides are a little bit straighter, and pixels really like straight sides. And how much pixels like straight sides was then something that we spent something like 6 months on playing with. We set up a little research lab with different kinds of screens and different kinds of things connected to the screens, and we observed and took photos and made a lot of prototypes, just to make sure that we weren't drawing anything, you know, based on any assumptions that would later turn out to be wrong. For example, the bellies of the A hanging so far down, maybe not so good. We had a rough idea about, you know, okay, this device can be connected to a television, this really only happens with a computer, there's higher resolution, and so on. And also we knew from talking with the interface designers there, here's sort of the small type sizes that we use a lot, so we could work for that. This is actually something we showed this to the client. This was part of the research. Do you want to guess why? It's because when you have very low resolution, you want to make sure that these stair steps look nice. So for an italic angle, we were sort of restricted to a handful of angles that we know work well. So this was what we were currently constantly looking at. You know, different pixelizations, rasterizations, and anyway, then the outcome is just what you would expect, like a slightly straight-sided, low contrast, no nonsense, very clean, kind of technical, roughly Morris Fuller-Benton Gothic-inspired typeface. But there was one additional kind of problem, which was, so different browsers or different technology stacks make the text really appear very differently heavy, right? So this is just an older experiment. So this is Safari on the Mac, Chrome on the Mac, this is Edge on Windows, and this is Chrome on Windows. The same typeface, same website, just put next to each other. Great. So if you want to have your text, you know, it's part of your brand. You know, you want to have some kind of consistency. If I have my iPhone in my hand and I look at the big screen over there and the fonts look totally different, that's not a fun experience. So we did something that is normally done, or that was in the olden days done for newspaper typeface, with a thing called grades, which means that you have like slight variations in thickness with the same metrics. So that if the typeface printed a little bit heavier on a certain press, because I think like very high humidity, then you would use a slightly thinner version of the typeface, and when you were printing in a drier climate where the text would not sort of expand so much, you would use a heavier version of the typeface. And we did exactly that. So for you know, systems where the text would look heavy, we would use a light version of the typeface, and for systems where the text would look, you get it. And with that, we were sort of able to even that out to some degree. So all of these typefaces exist. Plot twist: they're only using the middle one. Again, a really cool project with there is a big problem here, with a large number of people that worked on it. I am currently on the fly fixing the lecture. And it was fun to work with all of these different people. Oink. As you can see, again, we work with Ilya and with Irini. Mike Duggan, probably the best person in hinting in the world, the kind of things you can do when your client has money. We also were really, really lucky with Jim and Rob. They were fantastic to work with, and Jim and we are still really good friends, and we're always happy when we see each other. The end. I fixed it.
Let's see if it's fixed.
Maybe.
So, another type specimen. In 2021, Typotech asked us to make a complete specimen of their typeface library. That's more than 4,000 fonts in more than 20 writing systems, from Arabic to Telugu, from Armenian to Thai. It is a catalog of typefaces, but we thought it can also be a declaration of intent, a statement of how things could be done. For example, Latin is only one of the 20 writing systems. Saying Latin and non-Latin is a very colonial way of looking at things. And Typotech invests in a wide range of support because global equity needs... Language support, sorry. Because global equity needs the ability to communicate. Typotech works with linguists, native speakers, and indigenous communities around the world. So we wanted to show all these writing systems and all of the typefaces that support them equally. And as mentioned before, we wanted to set a tone to go with that, one that aspires to global equity and unity. We have always hated dummy text, as we previously mentioned, and here it seemed particularly misplaced and a wasted opportunity. So we wanted to send a message, but a message in one word per page. Of course, there's all this other text on the page, which is interface, interaction, navigation, metadata for the typefaces, which languages are supported, how can they be paired, that kind of information also had to be on the specimen. And so if you put one word on a page, that word becomes really important. And we thought, we can't write that. So we hire a poet. And we asked Tishani Doshi, a poet from Tamil Nadu in India, for help. We gave her a little brief, which was, we asked her to write a poem about what unites us as humans in this world. How despite our different circumstances, we all live on the same planet, none of us is inherently better than another. We called it a world poem, and its title is Here. And this was the brief she got, which was very difficult, I have to say. She did a great job. And to show it in 23 writing systems, we needed to find out what languages use them and translate each one word, or a small set of words, of the poem into one language to have as many languages represented as possible. So for Latin, by number of speakers, there was 180 or so languages in the database that Typotech linguists maintain that use Latin. And we made a cutoff at a certain minimum amount of speakers so that we could still easily find people to translate a word. And we did the same for all the other writing systems, many of which are, of course, not used for so many languages. Some only for a few. So we had to ask Typotech's 50,000 closest friends for help. This was still Twitter at the time. And sometimes that was extremely interesting because actual discussions about language and tone and semantics would spring forward. But sometimes it was also just silence. You can get a discussion going on Twitter between 6 people about how to best translate a word into Esperanto. But if you ask for many translations into an African or Indic language, even if it's spoken by 100 million people, nothing. And that was quite a powerful reminder about global inequality and access to technology. But anyway, we kept on making these little images for each word and tweeted asking how to translate that word into that language. It was around 2,000 tweets. That would take a very long time to write. So with our friends at Rectangle, we wrote a little script that would read the poem and read which language we had decided to each word and found the right picture of each placeholder page, and tweet that automatically as a translation request. And after a while, the book started to look like this. Well, actually, it's not really true. For months, the book mainly looked like this. So it was an Excel sheet with all of the data and metadata of the typeface and the poem, and in which script and language it would be used. And of course, we were not going to lay out 500 pages by hand with so many different fields. So we hired Ariel Walden to write an InDesign script that would read all of the data from the Excel sheet and use it to fill and format a template that we had designed. With every new signature, one of the two colors changes to make sure that 550, roughly, very similar looking pages stay as interesting as possible, but also because we really like overprint effects. There was also a few articles in the type specimen about some of the typefaces, so the structure was interrupted. And this was all done during COVID times, and that probably informed the whole idea and the way we were able to set it up. Reaching out to so many people all over the world made us feel much less isolated in our little home office. Thank you.
Thank you guys for the really impressive and packed, information-packed presentation from your. So we invite questions em português ou em inglês. Nós ajudamos.
Yeah, it's fine. First of all, thank you so much for giving this amazing talk.
Olá, sou Laura.
I'm Laura. Hi.
Hi, Laura.
Fourth year student in communication design. So, it's a quite technical question, but I was very impressed about the TV typeface. And in the digital space, how does that translate? So, did you have a bunch of masters going into, because you had very close in, visual wise, I'm talking about visual, very close in weight, right? Because you had to work between the different systems. So, how many masters would you say you created during that time?
The actual typeface is a variable typeface with 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 masters. So 4 for the Romans and 4 for the italics, and half of them are sort of a little bit automatically made. So because the weight differences in the grades is really small. Yeah. So they start out as just like slight interpolations that then get respaced to not be like wider or narrower.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I didn't feel all the so I thought that was really a great move to bring so many people together when you are creating something, and especially something that you realize that you are not able to create by yourself. So, given this idea of bringing so many people into your circle, I'm just wondering, given the recent times, what is your opinion about AI in the context of type design?
But AI are not people.
Yeah, exactly. Since you use so many people in your circle, which is, in my opinion, very positive, you could just simply use AI, which I'm obviously not in favor of. So I'm wondering, what is your opinion? Instead of using so many people, use AI or?
We never use AI. Never. But we do use automation. We have people writing code, and we could ask machines to write code, I guess. Especially when you are a coder yourself, it saves you a lot of time, I guess, because they can write code really well. We don't do that. We prefer to work with people. But we do understand that automation is necessary. For example, this specimen, no one could afford to make this by hand the way we did it. It would be impossible. So we had some friends. Everyone was paid, and fairly paid, to write a script for the tweets. And then we hired someone that actually writes InDesign plugins to write this plugin so that we could feed the pages, because if we would have to, of course, the essays we did by hand, and we did look at everything and all the words, and we fixed things by hand, but all the fields were already in place in the right color, in the right typeface. This would be so much work. Even just managing the menu, you know, managing the font menu on InDesign to select all of these typefaces. That would be impossible.
If you really want to make your computer dog slow, just load 5,000 typefaces.
5,000 typefaces.
It's going to be great.
So we believe in automation, and we believe that you should use your computers wisely. AI is a different thing. Like, for example, me personally, I have big problem with the resources that it uses that are so wasteful and so damaging for our planet. I can't do it.
It is also it is also a further sort of concentration of power to, like, you know, Western technocracies that I don't think it's necessary. You know, there's people who can draw pictures. I don't need a robot to draw a picture that anyway he can only draw because the machine slurped up all the pictures in the world previously.
Yeah. Also, like, a lot of the things that AI can do, I want to do myself. I don't want AI to sketch for me. Oh, that's the things I like to do. Like, stay away from the things I think it's fun to do. Do my taxes. I would like, do my taxes, please. But I can't.
Do my taxes, let me draw my pictures.
Yeah, wash my dishes. Not possible.
I have two questions. What tips that you can give us about making someone typeface? Because sometimes I don't know, an end is always difficult or something like that. What is the problem that you normally have? And what tips can you give us so we can make our work faster?
Make decisions faster?
Yeah, make decisions faster.
I think what really helps is that you have a very clear idea of where this typeface should go, meaning, for example, what it should be used for. I always envisioned Leon as a book typeface, like something for hundreds of pages of text. And that's what it is optimized for. That other people want to use it for magazines is not my fault. But having a very clear goal or a clear idea about where it should live, what kind of tone of voice it should have, I think that is like one good tip. 1A, when you're working on like historically informed typefaces, let's call it a revival, I think you should develop an idea about what are you adding to it. You know, it's not in about 2013, there was a great interview in a magazine called Movie Maker with Jim Jarmusch. And he stated his 5 golden rules for filmmaking. And the last one was about just steal everything from everywhere. And then make sure that you move it forward. He ends that paragraph with a quote Godard, which curiously I could never find anywhere except in these articles. So
Maybe it's made up.
Maybe it's a made-up citation. But according to Jarmusch, Godard says, it's not about where you take things from, it's about where you take them to. And I think that is the best tip I can give for working with revivals. Second tip, very practical. Drawing is useless without proofing. Thank you. Well, thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Written proofs, I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, but they show a lot on screen.
We never.
Hinting proofs.
Yeah, but that was because of it was a screen typeface.
Hey, I do actually a lot of proofing on the screen. Now that we have all super high resolution screens, and it started when we were working with all of these people from all over the world, we moved a lot of our proofing to an iPad. It was perfectly.
Yeah, but it was a screen typeface.
No, like for
I
all
would
the
Lyon.
Lyon stuff.
Yeah.
That was also really helpful for teaching during COVID times. But yes, occasionally printing, especially if a text typeface, is a great idea. Don't print too small, because then you're looking at what your printer is doing, not at what your typeface is doing.
Yeah, and for typography, we print a lot, especially me. I hate looking at things on the screen, but that's me. Because you never see what things are actually.
Yes, so I'm an Erasmus student here, so I was also wondering, because of the outside perspective, how you perceive the branding and just the general editorial landscape here in Portugal or Porto, from your own experience.
There are amazing studios in Porto. Actually, I think the best editorial designers in this country are based in Porto. So I only have good things to say. There's also great bookstores, not only for illustration, I mean, I'm sure you know them, but also for design. Independent bookstores, which is great. Yeah. Do you have any more specific question?
Like, maybe some differences, like, because I see some, like, if I see the posters and advertisements in Lausanne, it's very different from here. Yes.
Are you talking about editorial design or?
Yes, like things you see in the real world, not only in the work environment, just outside. Like,
But in Lausanne, there is like 6 times the budget for every poster and every book that is here.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't mean it in a negative way. Like, I don't want you to say, oh, this is so, like, I don't know. Just to know the difference.
Portuguese graphic design is pretty good at making a lot out of a little. I'll say that. It's, it's not circumstances here where you can always hire the best lithographers, printers, and binders, or where you can print 27 spot colors in every book. And yet, people learn to live with these restrictions and know to make brilliant graphic design. And I think that working through these restrictions, it's also something that we are very clear on in our work. A restriction is not a restriction, it's just it's a different way to explore your creative response. So yeah, no, I think the scene in Portugal and in Porto especially is actually really good. And what I like especially is that there is a lot of independent 1-2 people book design outfits that create fantastic work. Sure.
Yeah, that's fine.
I really appreciated your approach to dismantling the European games when you were presenting World Polo. you know, this idea of like the Latin and Latin concept. My question is, what should we like take in consideration when creating like a typeface or an editorial typeface to like, you know, dismantle this European base, like almost decolonize our minds from what we were taught?
Oh my gosh, that's a really difficult question. But I would say learn to listen. Learn to listen outside your circle. Give voice to people that have less voice than you have. Ask people that are from outside our bubble, you know. Ask what they think. Ask how they see things. And especially when you are designing something that is for a different culture, or really make an effort first to listen very well to your client and then to ask for help if you need. Like I didn't bring that book, but we designed a book in 3 languages, 2 writing scripts. One of them was Arabic, and of course we couldn't typeset that book. It didn't even cross our mind that we would that. So we hired like Arabic typesetter and designer to work with us, and he did more than just typesetting. He actually worked on the typography of the whole book with us, because we wanted to have similar text image, but of course the writing systems are so different. And the way I thought Arabic looked very good, he said, no, you can't read this, because it was too tight, it was too tightly set. So we had to adjust also the English and the Dutch so that we would have a consistent typographic image. Oh. So I think it's really about listening well, listen with attention.
And I think maybe another thing is like become or be aware to whose stuff you are using. You know, we don't all need to use typefaces from global mega corporations and from dead old European white men. There's other kinds of people who also make typefaces, very good ones.
Diversify as much as possible.
Maybe one final question, just if no one else. So we're in a graphic, in a communication design school. Well, in a fine arts school, which has communication design, of course, and several other master's degrees. And what I've taken from your presentation, and once again, thank you very much. This is a great presentation. Is that you navigate through the ideas rather quickly with enough importance, suspense, but you navigate through, I'll call it a technical process, although I don't think it's the most challenging or important thing. You navigate through the making of it, through having colleagues, friends, and skills, you and your team, to actually pull them together. So what do you see? So we have a few bachelor students and a lot of master students, maybe from other areas. How do you, let me see if I can make this clear. What do you think are the skills most relevant for today's training in graphic design, or what should they be paying attention to? You talked about automation, you talked about history, you talked about ideas, you talked about visual references, you talk about culture. So how does one navigate in our education through all of, I know you probably know my bias, but what would you tell them? Invest this way. Invest in friends, of course. Invest in...
Don't invest in AI. Invest in people. But yeah, I mean, you looked here at a practice that is now, apart from the years that we were studying, we have been working together now for almost 20 years. Mm. And this way of working has developed, over 20 years. what is important? People, yeah, to know how to listen and to be aware of what is around you. I don't know if kind of skill, learn how to do things with your hands, slow down. It sounds silly, but that's what I teach my students actually. I do assignments that are completely analog because I think this is where creativity comes from. If you work only with software, for example, first year students, second year students don't dominate the software very well, and as they shouldn't, because they're just starting out to use it. You are not going to design what you want to design, but you're going to do what you know what to do in the computer. So do it by hand. The old, beautiful cut and paste. I mean, it's so fantastic. Cut and paste. You know, I find it's so much more creative. I work with cut and paste myself. I have a project here that was all done in cut and paste, and then later on translated to the computer so that it could be sent to an offset machine. Yeah, learn to work with your hands. Don't be as, I don't want to say this word. Don't be dominated by the software that you have to use. Try different things. Draw. Draw. Make formal sketches, even if they are very quick. Also, sketches don't need to be perfect and detailed. That's another thing that actually we learned with Peter van Bockelen was our teacher in type and media. He always said, start the sketches, you know, you start by making 1 minute sketch, then when you know more or less what you want to do, then you start with 5-minute sketches, and then you go on to 20-minute sketches, meaning, you know, you test your ideas very quickly. And then you have many ideas with already a lot of visual possible directions, and you refine as you are more certain, because then you'll do many more sketches. If you spend a whole day in one sketch, it's such a waste of time. It's a waste of time, because maybe it's not good, and then you wasted one day, and you still need to work on 2 other projects, and you don't have time. So I think that's the most important thing. Learn how to iterate quickly, and not everything needs to be done on a computer. Really, computers sometimes are really our enemies.
And not only for purposes of, I don't know, efficiency or whatever, cherish your really bad sketches. Because you're making sketches just to take something that is in your head and put it on paper, because the head is a terrible, terrible place to keep ideas in. And once you have it on paper, you can point at it and you can say, this part is terrible, but this part is rather nice. And then with the next drawing that you make in a very short time, as Susanna just explained, you try to keep that nice part and try to get rid of the terrible part. Yep. And so you can see your own progress quickly, and you always have something that you can look at and you can point at and you can show to somebody else. And even if it has to be, you know, explained what the sketch actually means, it's a tool for communicating with yourself, but also with others. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming.
Trouxemos alguns livros que nós fizemos que usam os nossos tipos de letra. Portanto,
e outros, na realidade.
E outros também, mas que também usam os nossos tipos de letra. Se quiserem ver, estão à vontade, estão aqui.
Obrigado.
Nada.